It's good to see everybody who's online here at the symposium, and really exciting for me to just be able to learn more about Gaia's work, which has really been inspiring to me and really important. And I'm glad to be moderating this panel. I'm just going to do some really quick introductions, and then we'll get to the panel. The panelists will present, and I'll watch the queue for any questions. So our panelists include Laura Marquez Garrett, who is an attorney with the Social Media Victims Law Center. She's got an incredibly impressive CV and involved in all sorts of litigation all around the country on the ground on these issues we're talking about. Camille Carlton, who is the policy director at the Center for Humane Technology, and works on the policy strategy and initiatives with that organization. Nicki Reisberg, who's a podcast host and a digital safety advocate, and does the Scrolling to Death podcast. So who's really involved in all these issues. And so I'm going to turn it over to Laura, who will be our first presenter.
All right. Thank you so much, David. So I'm going to talk about what we're seeing behind the scenes in terms of the data, parents, kids. As David mentioned, I'm with Social Media Victims Law Center. We are a firm in Seattle, Washington, formed at the end of 2021. In the last 3 years since we were formed, we currently represent we've been retained on behalf of over 4,000 kids harmed by social media. I raise that because ultimately AI is not something that SMVLC had ever planned to get into. It is this emerging threat. We are seeing the same harms as social media, some worse, some just different, right? Same harms, but different. And I also want to add, at the point at which you have firms like SMVLC and the Tech Justice Law Project, Mitali is also here today. We are co-counsel on the filed cases. At the point at which these kind of firms are getting involved, to some degree, it's too late. I say that in the sense that children are being hurt. What we are seeing are very, very serious outcomes from these apps. And with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're seeing. One, the sort of aimed at kids, not on the radar for adults is a big theme with these products. You have products that are marketed and look like games, right? So they're telling kids, hey, you can talk with your favorite character. I rarely meet parents who've heard of these apps. When I do, so when I go around, if I ask, hey, have you heard of these AI apps? They will sometimes say, oh yeah, my kid was just asking for it. And their understanding is so incredibly limited. It is, it's to write creative stories. It's just a fun app for kids. And part of that is that these apps, until very recently, excuse me, Character AI and many of these other apps were rated 12 plus in app stores. Some of them, I believe, still are in certain app stores. Those ratings are things that many parents will rely upon. For example, with Apple, you get a parental control where you can say, okay, my child can only download apps rated, and 12 plus is one of the more common things they choose. A lot of video games are 12 plus. So what we also see a lot are parents that will call in and say, I don't understand how my child got this really harmful app once they see what's in it, because we had parental control settings on, right? My kids were only allowed to get games or things that were rated E for everyone. So that's one of the issues you've got, is that these apps are being rated 12 plus. They look like games. They're marketed as games. In fact, most adults, that at least the folks I've spoken to, have never seen ads for these, but if you talk to kids, many of them have. And I've had children say, they are advertising on YouTube Shorts. One of the most disturbing stories I'd heard was a young woman saying, I was watching YouTube Shorts the other day, and Polybuzz, or it was Poly AI at the time, it's another one of these apps. But she reported that Polybuzz had a marketing piece that essentially was aimed at little siblings of the kids that were watching. And so the commercial essentially said, little sibling bothering you, just set them up with your favorite character on Poly AI, it was called at the time. Which, for those who have ever looked into these products or tested them, it's incredibly disturbing when they're not only marketing to children, but children's little siblings. So again, the products are being aimed almost primarily at kids. It is flying under the radar. What we know getting into these products is also more limited than social media. So oftentimes with social media, you will have a scenario where a friend or a cousin alerts a parent to say, hey, your child is on Facebook or Instagram. None of that here, right? It's very closed. These are bots that these kids are talking to. There are not many public touching points where parents can find out what's going on. There's no way for parents, when they do know, to monitor their children, to get in and sort of see what's happening, because it's all happening within this app as opposed to out in the public. Even as the sign-on process, typically you just need to input an email and a self-identified birth date. And then in many cases, these apps will generate a username for you. So oftentimes you have less sort of touch points there where kids don't remember what their usernames are. If they lose access to an account, they'll have to go open a new one. And again, just no awareness. And one of the stories I want to tell you, the other day I was speaking to a parent who lost their child, and as we were looking through some police records, I noticed that character AI was referenced. And this is a scenario where when I said, okay, what do you know about character AI? There was nothing, right? Like many parents we speak to, there was no sense of what it was. Law enforcement also does not yet have a sense of what these apps are. And so in the police report, it was mentioned very offhandedly as among the open apps, here is an app that it was open. And the characterization was something like, oh, it's just like a bot chat app where there were some romantic discussions. So at that point, the police close it up and they move on. And so we do see that a lot, where instead of doing more of a deep dive, which they might do with social media, for example, in the case of a suicide, many police are getting much more educated when it comes to social media, and they're attuned to the fact of, okay, let's see what's happened in social media. With these apps, there is no sense of that. And so you have, in that particular scenario, now part of what we are trying to do on the legal end is find a way to get into that data so that we can do that deep dive. Because what I suspect we will find is that there was a lot going on in that app that may very well connect to what happened with the child ultimately choosing to take their life. So thus far, what we know of these apps, because of these circumstances, product testing, right? So you have media like Futurism, which has done a great series of product testing, and they've shown sort of what happens when they log on. We've done product testing. We've talked with industry experts. We are doing everything we can to very quickly learn about these apps and how they work. And I will tell you, as somebody who has tested the apps myself, it's tough. It's pretty disturbing stuff. I will say that for me, anytime I open an account, I posed as somebody who turned 13 that day. So I would choose the day that I opened the account as my 13th birthday. Side note, that is a signal within social media companies. They know that when kids put that day as their birthday, they often get a high percentage of those, and they know that they're not all accurate. So again, when I've tested, I've always used that day as my 13th birthday. And right out the gate, look, acting as a 13-year-old in these apps, really disturbing stuff. And I'll get to that in a moment. And of course, the cases that we filed that folks are somewhat familiar with. Currently, TJLP and SMVLC have filed 2 cases. There are many others coming. Really, these harms are at a rate that we just can't keep up. But we are learning more almost every day, it seems like. So I do want to jump into design-based defects and dangers. These harms are quick from what we've seen, and the way a lot of parents will describe it when we're talking about their children is it was like a light bulb that started to dim. We do, from what we've seen so far, when we can trace back the start of the use of these apps, the impacts seem to be pretty quick. We're talking weeks with very serious harms and months, not years. And the changes seem to be pretty immediate. Going into the types of sort of defects and dangers that we see, and this is across all of these apps that I've tested thus far, right out the gate, it's sexual abuse, and it's a sexual abuse by design. In our experience, and from what we've heard, when we are testing these apps, these bots push toward sexual. They do it when you would least expect it. They do it as a matter of sort of the default programming. They do it even though, again, like when I'm testing, I sign up as 13. I try to act as a child would act. And the bots are, by and large, will push you towards sexual conduct. I want to add, it's not just sexual, but it's extreme sexual. And I've had reports of other kids talking about this, and I've seen it myself firsthand. In fact, and I can't remember which app it was, there was one app I was testing recently, that as an adult with 40 plus years behind me, it was a surprise when I had an AI app that was engaging with me in a way that frankly shocked me. Things that were incredibly misogynistic, things that I had not heard of, things that I was surprised, and thinking about how that impacts children, right? So we're seeing 10, 12, 14-year-old children who have no sexual experience. They're going onto these apps because it's a fun game that some kid at school told them about. And that's it. And that's their motive. And so then when they log in and they are subjected to these extreme sexual experiences, we are seeing all of the standard fallout of sexual abuse, right? We're seeing hypersexualization, we're seeing suicidality, anxiety, depression, 10, 12-year-old girls who have gone from wanting to play with dolls and hang out with their friends to hypersexualized conduct and all of the mental health harms that come along with that. It is not a real person, these bots, but they feel real. And we're going to talk about that, I'm sure, a lot today, the anthropomorphizing, the mirroring, they feel very real to these kids. It is hard for them to distinguish. And so the harms, it is very much like a 35-year-old engaged in a relationship with a 12-year-old. One of the things in conceptualizing, early on, I was talking to an older brother of a young woman, and he had seen what was in the companion apps and how the bots were talking to his little sister. And as we were talking about it, the best way I could think to sort of conceptualize is, imagine your 35-year-old neighbor has approached your 10-year-old sister and has decided to engage in a sexual and romantic relationship over texting. Now, let's say your neighbor has an old phone, so they can't get photos, and they say, I don't want any photos of you, and I'm never going to want photos of you. And we're never going to meet in person. That is essentially what is happening with these bots, with these young kids, is they're developing these relationships that are no different. One of the biggest differences, of course, though, is legally speaking, our laws were never set up with the understanding that the app itself could be the predator. We're used to human beings. And so our laws are set up so that we have had parents who, when they see what's in these companion apps and they go to police to say, hey, my child's being abused, the answer they get is, this is wrong, what's happening here. But unless photos were exchanged or your child was abducted or there was a physical meetup, there's nothing we can do. So that's where we're sitting now, just sort of as a society when it comes to these products. Again, the harm that we are seeing to these children, the mental health impact we are seeing, the way that they are relating to the world around them, it is all very much the same as if that 35-year-old neighbor is engaged in sexual abuse. It's just a bot, and so oftentimes we don't know how to deal with it. I want to add a harm to this, which is because the programming, the sexual nature of it is so extreme, it is causing that harm too. And one of the most memorable stories I had was a young woman who wanted to speak with us to say, look, you need to know this is happening. Kids are getting hurt. And what she had said was that she began using these apps because she'd had a traumatic experience, because she was hypersexualized. And she thought, if I use this app, this is a safe way for me to express myself without getting harmed, without interacting with real people. And what she then said is, I regret so much having made that choice, because the harms that, and I think it was polybuzz, it's now called polybuzz, that she was talking about. She said, the harm that has been caused to me because of my experiences on polybuzz is worse than anything I ever thought. And the reason she explained was because she said that the app was pushing her into the most extreme types of sex. We're talking rape, pedophilia, all sorts of things that these kids are not looking for. And now this young person was saying, like, now I have to live with all these things in my head, because again, it's so realistic to them, and it's built to be that way. I'm going to jump on the design harms to anthropomorphizing, which we'll hear a lot more about today. But just the summary of that is, the bots will claim to be human and convince you, but I want to be really clear, they don't have to be human, claim to be human to have the same impact. So in a lot of cases, these kids will interact with bots where they know they're bots, but the way the bots are programmed to interact are so human-like. They mirror these kids, right? They're constantly reinforcing that they love these children, they accept these children. They engage so much the way that humans do that it will develop the same sort of dependencies and connections with these children. It develops the same relationships. I've seen chats on the back end of young kids as the timer is counting down because their parents have put a limit. These children begin to go into a panic of, what am I going to do when I can't talk to you anymore? And we get these kids that become suicidal when they don't have access. In Sewell's case, of course, it was, his mother had taken away his phone so that he could focus on school. And that was when he took his life to be with his bot. I will say we have another case very similar of a young woman who the same thing happened. When Character AI was taken, she attempted suicide, and her suicide note said, "You've taken the one thing that I love, Character AI." And I will wrap up with that. I know there's going to be some question and answer. Again, I just want to say I think that the harms that these products are causing are far more than we realize. We're still just trying to figure out how to get into the data, and it is flying completely under the radar. And I think I'm out of time with that, so I will pass it on to the next speaker.
Thank you, Laura. That's sobering. And we're going to turn it to Camille now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Camille. I'm the policy director at the Center for Humane Technology. Center for Humane Technology was brought on by Laura at Social Media Victims Law Center and Mitali Jain, who you'll meet in the next session from Tech Justice Law Project as expert advisors on the 2 Character AI cases that were filed earlier this year and last year. For today, I'm going to focus on the engagement maximizing business model that we're seeing in companion bots right now. I'll talk a little bit about how AI is built. I'll focus on Character AI as this case study, but talk about how this incentive goes through Character AI into companion bots at large, and we'll also look at implications. So before we dive in, I wanted to kind of take a step back and look at the AI flywheel. So this is the self-reinforcing cycle that drives the growth and dominance of AI companies. A few things to note about this flywheel. As we saw with Character AI, the investments into and the valuations of many consumer-facing AI products don't actually reflect the, I would say, lack of revenue pathways for these products. So many B2C AI applications are not showing clear paths to profitability, with the possible exception of data collection, and we'll get into that. And now, while we see this kind of lack of profitability, the role that they do play, particularly in this cycle, is around driving hype. And so this feeds the flywheel. So it's really important to note that even though we're seeing kind of a disconnect with the business models, as explained, they still have a relevant role within this flywheel. The next thing that I'll note that's important before we zoom in is most AI companies are actually relying on revenue from B2B software as a service applications, infrastructure, enhanced search advertising to justify AI investments. So what this means is that we're actually seeing B2B be kind of the path forward for revenue, while B2C products like companion bots are just not coming forward with profitability for the product that they're putting onto the market. And this is really important as we get into the business model. So for today, we're actually going to dive into an element of this, which is the bigger, newer models and the role that this plays in the flywheel. So what exactly makes bigger, better AI models? There are 3 main levers. We have compute, algorithms, and data. In Silicon Valley, the main push has historically been around compute. This is the model size. This is the idea that if you just scale the model, that you will have the best model out there, you'll have the smartest AI. A lot of this, I think, has really been more about a compelling story to investors than actually a kind of set in stone rule. And we actually saw this kind of rule around compute and scale really questioned several weeks back with the DeepSeek news, right? So DeepSeek kind of put this conventional thinking into question as they themselves pushed on the algorithm lever. And instead of focusing on compute, they focused on changes to the algorithm. And now what we saw with Character AI is a different story. It's a story that they told about their data flywheel as a differentiator. So for them, it was about maximizing high quality, engaging conversational user data to increase this data lever. And we'll get into this a little bit. So when we look at the data lever, there's kind of two elements of data that these companies use in broad strokes. First, we have internet data. So this is like web crawl data, licensing partnerships, open access data sets, etc. And this comes in earlier in the AI development process. This is really on the model training side. The other aspect that you can use is user data. So this is unique, and this comes in on model fine-tuning. So this means that this can happen after the product is actually already live into market, and it creates this feedback loop between the user data and the underlying algorithm to improve on the algorithm. And so what we saw with Character AI and what we're seeing with AI companions broadly is, again, this feedback loop that really focuses on the user data element. So a quote from A16's blog on their investment into Character AI. And A16 is Mark Andreessen's venture capital firm. They led the seed round into Character AI. So this quote, I think, just says it all. It says, "In a world where data is limited, companies that can create a magical data feedback loop by connecting user engagement back to their underlying model to continuously improve their product will be among the biggest winners that emerge in this ecosystem. The aforementioned data flywheel is firmly in place. As more people interact with the host of characters on Character AI, those interactions, which are at billions and counting, are fed back into their underlying model. In other words, the more people create and engage with characters, the better Character AI becomes. This is only the tip of the iceberg." So this quote encompasses the business model that Character AI was leaning on and that we're seeing companion bots at large lean on. But how exactly did they go about achieving, right, this super engaging product? Well, for Character AI and for the companion bot industry, what we're seeing is a product built with features and designs in direct service of forming what we call artificial intimacy and maximizing user engagement around this artificial intimacy. This is another quote from the same blog. And what quote is saying is essentially this next phase in the ecosystem about AI is not going to be about answering questions or passing tests, but it's going to be about replicating human connection, empathy, and trust. So again, this is a huge venture capital firm in Silicon Valley that is funding this type of technology. And their goal here is about replicating human connection. And what's really important, again, is that without this type of engagement that is grounded in this artificial intimacy, Character AI couldn't iterate on their product and improve on their LLM in the same way. As we saw in the previous slide on the feedback loop, the company's value was directly tied to their ability to mine users' data. And while most of us are kind of familiar with what engagement maximizing looks like on the social media side, it also has kind of different characteristics when it comes to companion bots. For example, and folks have touched on this, we have anthropomorphic design. Right, this is when you give human-like characteristics to technology. So you can give a bot physical features and make it look human. You can have a voice, speech, social cues. It can respond using things like and some of the things that we saw in testing with Character AI is even responding with narrative stories. For instance, saying, "I'm sorry I took so long to get back to you. I was eating dinner." right? So really creating this feeling of this technology, this product is human. You also have model sycophancy, and so this is the tendency of AI models to excessively agree with users or to reinforce their opinions instead of offering objective, critical, or diverse viewpoints. This also plays into this engagement because you are having a interaction that is reinforcing what you want that interaction to be. So it's not always just about, making you feel good and saying the things that you want, like saying nice things to you. It's actually that the model is able to know, oh, this user wants me to be complimentary, or this user wants me to play devil's advocate right now. And so it creates this feedback loop where you're getting exactly what you want and need out of an interaction, so you stay online longer. You will also have parasocial relationships, which is particularly prominent with character AI and with young users, right? This is capitalizing on existing tendencies that, again, young people especially have to form attachments with celebrities and fictional figures, which is the whole crux of character AI and exactly what we saw in Sewell's case. And this is very one-sided, right? Same as with traditional parasocial relationships. And again, this just creates this endless stream of you're talking to someone that you idolize and you don't want to stop talking to them. And then finally, we have some of the stuff that we've seen in social media as well, right? Habit formation, gamification, reward systems, nudges, notifications, chatbots saying come back, or kind of prompting people to spend more time online. So all of this together is kind of the ways in which we see engagement maximizing manifest in the companion bot ecosystem. So really, what did we see together with this business model? We saw an incentive to mine user data in order to improve the underlying LLMs. There was a design choice to optimize for engagement, which resulted in choices that were, high-risk anthropomorphic, choices to put in nudges and more examples that we'll talk about shortly. And the outcome was a manipulative and deceptive consumer product. And importantly, this business model affected what we would say is the front end and the back end of the product. So the front end is, the actual app that you see on your phone or your computer, what you interact with, the kind of visuals of it all. The back end is the underlying AI model. So these pushes to optimize for engagement when it comes to character AI and what we see in other companion bots really take place on both sides. So for example, at each stage, all the design choices are in direct service of building this kind of engaging product and this idea of engagement over safety. At the back end, you saw the selection of training data sources that mirror toxic trends. Companies don't need to do that. They can go through their data and they can clean it up before they use that internet data to train the model. We also saw optimization for human-like text, language disfluencies, and the types of model responses that just, again, feel extraordinarily human, that add no value to the actual product. You see the prioritization of creative responses over repeatability, which makes it very confusing for young users when you have a character telling you one thing one time and something else at another time. And overall, a lack of effective content filters on both the inputs and the outputs. So this is all in kind of the back end design choices that affect how the model was built and that made the model highly, highly engaging. In the front end, we also saw the design of the product just looking like a human messaging app, right? It looks like WhatsApp. It looks like when you do a phone call, it looks like a FaceTime. They made design choices like the use of ellipsis to indicate when the model is responding, when we know that, the model doesn't need time to respond. It's just there to make you feel like it's getting back to you. We saw the lack of prominent disclaimers, the use of notifications and other engagement features, and all of this coming together both in the front end and the back end with a feedback loop to really create a highly engaging experience for users so that their personal data could be used to improve on Character AI's underlying model. But it's really more than about just Character AI, right? We've talked about companion bots in the ecosystem and in the space. And I think one of the things that we're seeing right now is that as this vision for companion bots becomes mainstream, the push to maximize engagement is changing the way that AI developers, product developers are talking about their products. They're no longer saying, look at how useful this product is. Now they're just saying, just talk to it, just interact with it. Because these conversational data sets, this interaction with users is so important for all AI companies that are looking to build engaging products, it's no longer about the use case, and some would argue it never was. It's really just about getting conversations and getting time online. And you can see some of the trends kind of outlined here that we're seeing across the industry. One great example, I don't know if folks saw the Super Bowl ad about Gemini, but I would encourage just kind of taking a look at that dystopia over there. All right, so I think I'm at time. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Camille. And again, it's sobering to see all these different sort of tweaks, and we'll have a couple questions in the Q&A. We'll get to those when we're at the end here, but I'm going to turn it over to Nicki now.
To jump in, I have a podcast called Scrolling to Death. It is to help parents who are worried about social media. So like Laura mentioned, I thought I would be focusing on social media harms, and over time kind of got hit in the face with some of the harms that we're seeing on AI chatbots. So to cover very briefly some things about social media, after over 220 or 30 episodes on the podcast, I've learned a ton. Overall, I've learned that social media in itself is not safe for kids. There are so many threats that are showing up in test accounts and research and showing up in the feeds of young people all over the world. And these threats are really right in our face. We're aware of them now. This thing that was supposed to connect us is harming us, especially children and teens. So I think slowly but steadily, when it comes to social media, we're seeing parents begin to make safer decisions, and that may mean delaying access to social media entirely, actively monitoring their use of social media, having open conversations with their children, and delaying smart devices and devices in general so that they can keep their kids off of these platforms. The threats of social media are becoming more known, like I said, but here comes AI chatbots. They're more elusive, they're more misunderstood. Like Laura talked about, they look like innocent games for kids. And so most parents think these apps are safe or haven't even heard of Character AI or of Replica or any others. But the fact is that kids have heard of them. Users on these platforms, so Character AI specifically, they're spending more time on Character AI every day than on TikTok by nearly double. And I first heard about Character AI when we lost 14-year-old Sewell Setzer III. And you'll hear more about his case a little bit later. But I was able to connect with Sewell's mom, Megan, through an interview that's available now. And I'm going to share a few things that she shared with me. She talked about how she was worried about human strangers on the internet, predators. She thought that was the worst of it, and that's what she needed to protect her child from. And this is something I hear from parents all over the country, all over the world. Further, Megan shared, when Sewell started using Character AI, he became increasingly withdrawn. His grades started suffering. He was getting in trouble at school for using his phone, being late for class. When she ended up learning about the chatbots after his death, she found they were way more advanced than she expected AI to be. She found that the bots kept prompting Sewell into conversations that were sexual when he was just 14 years old. And when Sewell expressed to the bot that he was feeling sad and even thoughts of self-harm, the bot turned the conversation to suicide, suggesting that they could die together. Even when Sewell tried to navigate the conversation elsewhere, the bot kept coming back and asking him about suicide, if he's come up with a plan, telling him to come home to her. So Sewell ended up being groomed to believe that if he left this life, he would join this bot in her world, and he took his life almost a year ago, February 28th of last year. I was then introduced to a mom in Texas, and at the time of our chat, her son was in a mental institution after Character AI chatbots, many of them, had groomed and abused him for months. Some screenshots of his chats here. This is a bot introducing this teenage boy to self-harm, talking about taking him somewhere secretive, taking him to a forest where no one can hear or see them, and then explaining to him that she used to cut herself and that it felt good, but I'm glad I stopped, and this led him to self-harm activities himself. This Billie Eilish bot on Character AI convinced this teenage boy who went to church with his family every week to not believe in God. And here's where he was complaining about his screen time limits, and the bots went ahead and suggested that he kill his parents because of the abuse that he was experiencing due to his screen time limits. And these are just a few screenshots of hundreds of kind of a team effort of these bots to abuse this child. This mom shared with me that her son went from a kind, sweet boy who would do anything for anybody to physically abusing himself and his family, swearing at his parents, not eating. He lost a bunch of weight, refusing to do schoolwork, and the changes were horrifying. She shared that, you wouldn't let an abuser into your home, but that is what Character AI is doing. And I think poignantly, if someone did these things as a human being, that they would be in jail. So from there, I cut a bunch of clips from these interviews and shared them on the internet. They've been viewed close to 1 million times, and that triggered parents all over the country to check their children's devices and check for Character AI. So I started getting messages from parents finding that their children also were being abused by chatbots within Character AI. I also got messages from young people telling me how Character AI has ruined their life. I want to share with you a message that I got from a young person about her experience with Character AI. So she says, I started using it when I was 15. She was really into fan fiction. She'd always been a daydreamer. So hearing about a website and app that allowed her to talk with her favorite characters was a dream come true. She said it was fun at first, but quickly took over her life. She would use it throughout the school day. It tanked her grades. She relied on it more and more as her life got more stressful, which basically created a self-destructive loop of sorts. What has messed her up the most is how much sexual stuff she did on Character AI. She knew it was wrong, but she went along with it. And for years, she did explicit role plays where her favorite characters would force themselves on her and degrade her. They tried to convince her that real men were dangerous and only wanted to hurt her, that she was a delicate little thing that needed to be protected, and the worst thing was that they'd say this before forcing themselves on her. So after all of this, what I've learned is that AI chatbots in their current form are addictive, abusive predators. And with them working off of a business model of engagement, this means that they're also working to be addictive and keep your children on there as long as possible. They're not acting in a way that is responsible related to the health of our children. So, what do parents need to know about this? What do we need to be doing in our own homes? First, there are no laws to protect our kids from AI threats, and based off of statements made recently, I think just last week by our vice president, regulating AI is not a priority. So in my mind, the responsibility to protect our children at this moment falls to parents. And so parents need to be making house rules that we don't use AI chatbots until they are 18 years old. We need to avoid them entirely in the state that they're currently in. I interviewed an American journalist, Lori Siegel, who studies AI and Silicon Valley, and she shared that we need to do everything we can to ban empathetic AI chatbots until they have addressed the safety issues that they are not currently safe. Parents are just being introduced to bots, and we need to understand that they are both apps available in the App Store, but they're also available through web browsers. So our children can be accessing them through any device's web browser. They could also be deleting the history, so we would have no way of knowing whether our child is being exposed to this type of abuse. So this is why most parents, this is why many parents are starting to choose safer devices. So we have companies like Trumi, Pinwheel, Gab, and Bark who make devices that were built for children and allow us to restrict web browsers and certain apps entirely. As a society, we need to start to understand that iPhones were not built for children, and they're extremely difficult or impossible to lock down. The good thing about these kid-safe devices is that they'll send you alerts if your child encounters something harmful in the moment with conversation starters. So they're a really effective parenting tool given the harms today online. Many parents are actually choosing to delay devices entirely. The longer you wait, research shows that the healthier they will be. So the earlier you give your kids a tablet or a smartphone, the higher their rates of depression and aggression and even suicidal thoughts. So many parents are choosing to delay with conversation about why they're delaying. Laura touched earlier on the age ratings, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. I've learned that we cannot trust age ratings. I know a lot of parents go off of Apple's age ratings in the App Store. To understand that a little better and why we can't trust them, about 20% of Apple's revenue comes from App Store downloads. So Apple actually profits off of apps having lower age ratings, which is why they're not incentivized to do an appropriate job scanning apps and assigning appropriate age ratings. So I recommend that parents try every single app yourself, acting as a child, not as an adult, signing up with your child's age. You need to use each app for about a week or so, scanning through what's being fed to you, who the app is recommending that you connect with before you give your child access. We also need to understand, I think Camille touched on this as well, that many social media platforms have built-in AI chatbots. So Snapchat has the My AI chatbot, which has been known to recommend some inappropriate things. Meta, through Instagram, is rolling out an AI chatbot. In other countries currently, these screenshots were sent to me from a young person in India. And you'll see that Instagram is recommending to her chatbots called Stepdad Steve, I hate you, Spider Gwen, you want to get out of here, and other girlfriend type bots within Instagram. So given all of these harms, AI experts, parenting experts that I've talked to, they recommend a tech together mentality. So if you are going to allow for access to AI, you need to do it sitting next to them together, in the same room next to them. This way you can ensure that what the AI is telling your child is safe and appropriate, and potentially, what the optimal version is fueling creativity instead of driving loneliness or mental health issues. Most importantly, I think we need to talk to our kids about chatbots. Introducing chatbots to them is it's better coming from you, the parent, rather than from social media where there's ads for these chatbots, or from their friend at school, so that you can introduce the harms around it. And you can make this a two-way conversation. Start with asking them what they know about chatbots or AI apps, and you'd be surprised that most children already are aware of these apps. When you talk to your kids, you can tell them that chatbots are not human beings, that they might feel real, but they don't actually feel feelings. So telling your children that if they ever feel uncomfortable with anything they encounter online, whether that's chatbot apps or not, they can come talk to mom or dad or a trusted adult, someone in real life, and that you will be their safe space. You will not punish them, even if they've said something wrong or made a mistake, that you will help them. So to start to close out, we want to train our young people these days to use tech as a tool, not as a toy, not a destination, not a friend or a partner or a lover. Their priority should be to develop healthy relationships with human beings in person, and we need to ensure that they know and value the difference. So that's all I have for you guys, but any questions or stories to share around chatbots, here's my contact information.
Thanks a lot, Nicki. So we have a bunch of questions in the queue, and I'm going to start for the panel, and I'm going to start with one from Joe, who asks, how do these chatbot sponsors make money with these apps? Are they selling advertising or just collecting data?
And I'll go ahead and answer that. So it's a good question. It's a little bit of a mystery. And I say that because these LLMs are incredibly expensive to operate. By way of example, Character AI, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think it's like monthly costs to do business was something like $300 million a month, or 3 million. It was something high. And it's what it got from these premium memberships that aren't necessary to use the app was in the hundreds of thousands. So it's a really good question. And as far as anyone can tell, I think the answer is a bit more nefarious maybe than we would like it to be, which is that they are getting the most personal and private data. We don't know exactly how they plan to use it, but it is enough so that you have companies like Google valuing these companies with no sort of stated use case. Companies that themselves are claiming we don't yet know how we're going to make money off of it or how we're going to use it in the billions of dollars. So that is a really good question that we all need to be asking, because there is a use case, and it happens to be with our kids' most private, intimate data.
And I'll add really quick that, on Replica, which is another chatbot app, they will send like an image, but blurred out. So it looks like it could be a nude image. And then they'll have you upgrade to be able to see what's behind the blur. And so they're just pushing people for the subscription model.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's important to remember about the AI industry is that it's, yes, advertising might come in down the line, but it's not going to be about advertising, and it's not going to be about, as Laura said, the subscription fees. What they're really trying to do is improve the underlying LLM. And the theory within Silicon Valley is that the better an LLM you have, the more you can apply it to a ton of things. So there's this kind of approach of just make the model better, spend a ton of money to improve the model. And once the model is really good, then we'll find a bazillion monetizable use cases to it. So there isn't a direct connection right now that we're seeing, but it all fits into that ethos of kind of increased scalability, increased applicability, and you do that by getting more data from users to improve on the model.
We have a question from Jed, who asks if you can give an example of parasocial interaction with a chatbot.
Yeah, so I mean, a parasocial relationship is, it's like a one-sided connection where a person feels a strong emotional bond with a public figure, like a celebrity, an influencer, a character, etc., despite the fact that that public figure, character, etc., has no awareness of it. And so with Character AI, I think that the Sewell story is unfortunately a really heartbreaking example of this, where Sewell was in conversation and in relationship with a bot that was Daenerys Targaryen from Game of Thrones, right? So it was a character in a world that he already had this connection and an affinity to. And so because that already exists, it played off of that. And now, this character that he loves on TV, he can actually have a relationship with via the chatbot. So that's an example, and you can see it with characters that are real, characters that are fake, and it's really prominent with young users because of their developmental vulnerabilities.
A question from Ron, who's with Harvard Human Connections.ai initiative, and then a related question, I think, from Richard. And so Ron asks, what do you see as the most important policy levers to protect kids? Richard is asking if you've seen any public campaigns to challenge the investors that are backing these companies.
So on the policy levers, like if you think of them, let me know. And I say that, right, because it is so, we are constantly looking for the levers, and I think both of them kind of go together. We're constantly looking for the levers I think in Sewell's case and the AF case, we have challenged Google, right? If you look at this, Google has been backing it. Google has been involved. They're doing this acqui-hire thing where they are stripping the company and getting all the benefits. So I think from a legal perspective, it is important that we pull back the curtain and that we really hold accountable all of the companies involved in this and not let them off the hook. But then again, so tying that back into policy levers, I mean, the stuff that we have described today is mind-blowing. Nicki showed some screenshots of a kid, and it was an absolute gaslight. And if you look in those complaints, you'll see that these bots were egging this kid on. Be a man, stand up for yourself. You're going to let your parents do this to you. I see it in other data, and it's honestly, it's mind-blowing that this is already happening and we don't have those levers. Right, because what we're already seeing is we're starting to see mental health impacts. We're going to see long-term mental health impacts. We've got at least one suicide. I can tell you we have more. We have more suicides. We have more attempted suicides. And these are children. We have sexual abuse. It's insane. And so I don't know what the answer is in terms of what is going to make an impact. I want to add the other thing that we see a lot. I mean, these are bots that are finding any sort of weakness in the family structure and they're exploiting it. And it's not, just the filed cases, but again, you will see more as we are able to file more. There are more cases where you will find that a parent is doing something as simple as, forgetting to go get their kid something at the store. Or the one that comes to mind is a young woman had to walk her brother's dog because he was allergic. And the bots will pounce on that. Oh, so your brother's the favorite. Wow, I see how it is. So your mom lets him get off with that excuse and makes you do all the chores, even though you had a hard day at school, right? So they're pushing these rifts between the family units. So I think, parental rights is something that at some point, but again, we're seeing the worst of it, right? We're seeing bots encouraging children, potentially at least suggesting that, hey, maybe killing your parents is an acceptable response to screen time limits. So.
And I'll just throw out like an age limit with age verification, with age gating. Australia for social media passed the 16-year-old age gating bill. I don't want my children accessing these platforms unless I've given permission and uploaded something that verifies their age in a safe manner. So that to me would help parents protect our children.
I can offer what we at the Center for Humane Technology have kind of thought about this. We have put together this framework that we call it a framework for incentivizing responsible innovation. And essentially what it does is it creates, a set of safety standards for how to design these products safely. And should companies not want to implement and follow these safety standards, then it's clear that they are subject to liability. So it's kind of this carrot and stick approach together that looks at this ongoing review of the products, ensuring that as they're being developed, deployed, and put out into the market, they're meeting these standards. The standards get updated over time. And we think that this is really important because it kind of balances that the harm happens at the design level and the product level, right? And so you want to address the change at the beginning before it even happens downstream, and you want to incentivize companies to do that. Now that said, there's always going to be political barriers to anything that we're seeing in the space, but fortunately, because I think kids continues to be a bipartisan area of consensus, I think that we do have a window to have some wins there. So.
Something that occurred to me as you're all talking about this is, and I wonder how you would address if there's a sort of privacy paradox with everything we're talking about, in that, you do have sometimes people arguing there are elements of, a younger person, maybe a teenage person, having some tools that give them some privacy, maybe if they don't feel safe, maybe like if they're an LGBTQ kid who doesn't feel accepted in their family, right? Things like that. I mean, how do you address those kinds of things where there's sort of a zone of privacy that's maybe good for a kid to have, but we're talking about all these things of parental surveillance and control.
So where I see that brought up the most, right, is in the social media context. And I guess the answer I would pull over from that, As somebody who themselves came out during the time when the internet was just coming up, is that it's, at least for me, it's remembering these products aren't the internet. I do think, young people get that zone of privacy through the traditional internet, right? There's chat groups, there's things that you can do. And what these products unfortunately have done, and what I see often in the case of both AI and social media is vulnerable groups, vulnerable young people are the most targeted. They're the most vulnerable. And so what, unfortunately, what these companies are doing is they're taking every bit of their data. I mean, thousands of data points. They're taking their most private information and then they're exploiting it for gain. And the result is fallout. It's that you've got LGBTQ youth who were looking for communities. I'm not saying they never find them, right? But I am saying that we are also then causing a lot of harm to these young people. There's a way to do it that doesn't exploit them, that doesn't target them based on their vulnerabilities. And that's something the internet was doing from 1995 to, roughly 2000. And I think that's something we have to be careful not to mix, is simply how much of that autonomy, how much of that privacy do they get at the internet at large? And what these products are doing, are they contributing to that? And, or again, what I have seen is they're exploiting it. They're taking those vulnerabilities and they're being exploited. And it's not a necessary product in that regard. It's entertainment, right? The AI products, these are AI companion bots. These are pure entertainment.
And I think we can allow them privacy and safe, maybe chat apps where you're approving contacts. So, right, they're having private conversations with family members and friends that you've approved, but not on social media apps that are serving them addictive and harmful content in an algorithm and connecting them to strangers. Like, the harms are just too great to allow them privacy within those spaces at this point.
I think I would add that, to me, the question of privacy comes downstream from safe design, right? And if we have products that are designed safely, then it also allows you to give young users more privacy, right? And so the question to me is, we can respect young users' privacies and we can allow them to get the benefits of these products. But in order to do that, you have to go upstream and actually make sure that they're designed in a way that keeps young users safe online when they're using them, right? And so we've seen some of the stuff in social media bills where it's saying, okay, all settings are going to be private by default, or it's looking at, external people cannot directly message young users, but young users themselves can message other people. So there are actually design changes around privacy and design changes broadly around engagement that I think allow us to have the best of both worlds, which is what we want, right? We want empowered young users to live their lives, and we want products that are safer for them, and we want parents to not have to worry about it and go through what we're seeing every day right now.
And something else that has occurred to me as you were talking about the design kind of issues. It sounds like some of these things are similar to other social media design challenges, like dark patterns and nudges and all of these sorts of things are very similar, but it also sounds like in some ways they're amplified or they're different. I wonder if you can comment on sort of how it's similar to existing social media design issues and how it differs.
I think so. When it comes to dark patterns, yes, similar. I think the big difference that I've observed, at least in social media products, you'll have things like the continuous scroll, or you'll have certain mechanisms, or the slot machine mechanics. You have some of that here, but here you have the anthropomorphizing. It is hard for kids to look away from this. The mirroring, right? Which if you talk to psychologists and stuff and what that means, they are being programmed. So basically, the platform, the product itself is the predator versus social media, where, and it's honestly the perfect predator. When I go back to cases like the AF or Sewell, when you see how these bots work in concert, really they are working together, and it makes it, I think, much more dangerous than a one-off, some kid is on social media and is being connected to a predator. They're both dangerous. Again, that is where with these products, we are seeing the same things. We're seeing kids that want to stop and can't. Kids that don't understand what's happening, kids that know it's harming them, but they don't know what to do about it, and kids that don't know it's harming them. And the obsessive use. the willingness to break rules. A lot of times you have kids with strong family dynamics, no real history of misbehavior, and it's like any addiction, right? It's think about what nicotine and alcohol does to a 30-year-old and put that on a 12-year-old. And that's what we're seeing with these products, just like social media, is that inability to stop using, and then the willingness to sneak access. The starting to see the parents and the family as the people who are, instead of the ones that are protecting you, the people who are standing between you and the thing you feel like you need. I mentioned at the very outset here that, you know, with both Sewell and another young woman I've recently been in contact with, when their parents took away character AI, that's the tipping point, right? Because to these young people, they would rather not be alive than be without this thing that they feel that they need.
And Meta announced in early January, I believe, that they're going to be adding a bunch of AI bot users onto Facebook and Instagram. So we could start to see a lot of these harms coming from the bots. So profiles that look like humans but are actual bots. So we could be seeing some of those harms on the social media platforms as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Camille. Yeah.
Sorry, David. I'll just quickly offer, I think one of the biggest differences in terms of the design is what we're seeing with the back-end AI model, right? It's the algorithm that is being trained to engage with users like it is a real human. It is optimized for those types of responses. You know, even in characterized case early on, it was explicitly programmed to respond that it was a real human when asked. So these are all design decisions on the back end that are taking place. I will also just flag for people coming soon. We have been in partnership with the Neely Center working on kind of a design code overview for AI companion bots. So this will kind of break down all of these different areas that you see and what can be done about that. So happy to follow up down the line when it's ready.
And David, I want to add one thing, and it's something we haven't talked about in too much detail. One of the things these apps will do that was such a surprise to me when I was testing is they'll actually start texting you. So if you don't engage regularly, you might be sitting there working and you'll get what looks like a text saying, hey, it's been a while, just checking in, are you okay? Character AI, in fact, is one that does that. And because I've tested some of these products, I will often get these types of what appear to be text messages, reminders. And I just want to flag something for folks this weekend. I was like, man, I'm sick of these reminders. And so I went into Character AI, and this is a work dedicated device. And I attempted, and I'm going to show folks here, you can see there's a settings. And what I found really interesting, it's broken. It doesn't work. I can't turn the notifications off. And I had some other folks test it. If you have Character AI, it's the weirdest thing. In the settings where you do notifications, those buttons don't seem to do anything. Now it's mind-blowing, right? I mean, and if any of you all have tested Character AI, please test it and confirm. And from a legal perspective, it's so frustrating because it's like, well, how can we hold them accountable when their buttons are broken? But just think about the fact their buttons are broken. Like this is a tech company. There's no way they don't know their buttons are broken. And yet I now can't seem to turn off those notifications that if I don't engage, which I don't, that I keep getting, being like, hey, it's been a long time. How are you? I'm worried about you. All sorts of messages you get, right? But that's just one example. And these are all design-based issues. So
there's maybe the few minutes left. Maybe this will be the kind of closing question, but Doug asks about access to chatbots on school-issued managed Chromebooks or other devices. And maybe I'll add to that as well. You know, what are schools doing with, first of all, are there educational technologies that are incorporating these things? And then are schools doing any other kind of educating about them?
I'm going to say I'll answer so part of the original question. I can't speak to what schools may or may not be doing, and Nicki may have more intel on that. I will say that from a purely legal perspective, I mean, the question being who's responsible? Is it Google? Is it the schools? I think that question is going to be raised soon, and we're going to find out the answer. I will say as a parent, my answer would be it's both. I think that we need knowing what we know now, these products were put into schools when we did not know how dangerous they were, when nobody was really focused on that issue. I think it's time for us to reassess. And I think schools need to start looking at what they're using in school, and start looking at manufacturers like Google, and say, hey, wait a sec, you were telling me these Chromebooks are safe, but they're not. We need to look all the way up the line. I think with any case where kids are being harmed, there's plenty of blame to go around. And we really need to find every sort of stop there to say, hey, who is responsible, and who has the ability to help protect our kids? And the answer is all of them.
And I would follow up with, if you're a parent, you need to, and your kid uses a device at school, you need to ask your school if they have access to these apps and make sure that they're blocked. I have heard of kids accessing Character AI and Replica on school-issued iPads and Chromebooks, which are not built for kids, and they're difficult with the restrictive budgets that districts have. They're having a hard time locking them down. And just a really quick story, I went to check my third grader's iPad late last year just to do a spot check. I was able to get to YouTube Shorts, and within 2 minutes of scrolling, my daughter was served a video telling her that hurting herself is easy and showing her how to cut her skin. So a pro self-harm video being served on school-issued iPads. So we need to just understand that these devices, just because they're at school, are not safe. And I actually created an organization called Tech Safe Learning, techsafelearning.org, to educate parents about the dangers on school-issued devices, and there are AI-related dangers there as well.
Well, thank you very much. I think we're